and 4 flight instruments, which were very primitive. They were what you might have flown a World War II bomber with.
Cameron calls the nearest ground control.
Memphis Center, this is Air Canada 797.
Air Canada 797, Indianapolis Center. Go ahead.
Yeah, we've got an electrical problem here. We may be off communication shortly. Stand by.
Co-pilot Claude Ouimet is at the back of the plane. The washroom door handle has become hot to the touch. He doesn't even risk opening it. Faced with a potential fire on board, the crew have no choice but to land their plane as soon as possible.
I don't like what's happening. I think we'd better go down. We're going to be making an emergency descent. Brief the cabin crew. Soon.
But as soon as they make the decision, another warning light goes on. They've just lost most of their emergency power.
Mayday, mayday, mayday.
A small problem has snowballed into an all-out emergency.
Mayday, mayday, mayday.
This is Louisville Control, over.
Air Canada 797, we have a fire on board. We are going down.
Can you possibly make Cincinnati?
Roger that.
Cincinnati is 46 kilometers away. They can just make it. Captain Cameron begins an initial descent to 1,500 meters. The crew has switched to emergency battery power, but many of the plane's instruments aren't functioning. It's not only instruments. Cameron finds that a critical piece of his plane isn't working properly. Without power, the stabilizer on the tail of the DC-9 is frozen, set for cruising. Cameron can only descend by taking control of part of it. But like losing power steering, without his electrical systems, he has to do it manually. It's like pushing against 20 kilograms of pressure.
The airplane became very heavy, and I took my total concentration to fly the airplane.
An acrid, bitter smoke is creeping forward from the back of the plane and seeping in from the seams in the ceiling. It hangs like a cloud over the passengers' heads.
Incredibly harsh smoke that was really irritating your throat. You had to take really small breaths, otherwise you would choke.
I could see it rise. It was traveling along those luggage racks, you know, coming forward.
The smell of burning plastic fills the air. Dropping oxygen masks would make the situation worse.
I could have deployed the oxygen mask for the passengers, but it's forbidden. You're only allowed to use the oxygen mask in the case of a massive decompression or loss of cabin pressure, not for fire.
Pumping oxygen into a fire might actually fuel the flames.
I was crying and scared. I wasn't hysterical. The gentleman sitting next to me explained to me that if I would not cry and if I could, you know, conserve my, not breathe so fast, that it would conserve the oxygen, would help us, and not to worry, that the flight attendants, they really know how to handle these sort of situations.
In 1983, it is not standard procedure to tell passengers how to open the emergency doors. But in this case, the 2 flight attendants are taking no chances. As smoke begins entering the cockpit, the captain's situation is becoming critical. For the first time, Ouimet talks to the Cincinnati airport.
Approach, Air Canada 797. We're on Mayday. We're going down.
Air Canada 797, Cincinnati approach. Planned runway 36 ILS. And the equipment has been alerted. Do you have time to give me the nature of the emergency?
We have a fire in the washroom. We're filling up with smoke right now.
Gregory Karam is the approach tower controller. He's the lifeline for the struggling jet. Finally, Almost 13 minutes after 7, Karam catches sight of Flight 797 on his radar.
Air Canada 797, you are now fully identified. This will be a no-gyro radar approach for runway 27 left. Descend now to 3,500 feet. Your position is now 12 miles southeast of the airport.
With their electrical equipment failing, the crew needs to be guided in from the ground. Struggling to see through the dense smoke, they could easily veer off course. Karam will talk them down, watching them every step of the way. In the cabin, the smoke and heat are becoming unbearable.
My thought was, well, we're gonna crash. They won't be able to identify myself because I didn't have my papers with me, so I stood up, I took my wallet in the compartment and put my jacket on so that they could identify my body.
I knew at that point, that's when I decided, I felt that I was not going to make it.
Stan certainly had a sense of his own mortality, and he hated to fly. But the demand for Stan was growing, so he was flying more often. And he certainly had a sense that with so much traveling, his risk is elevated.
Through the growing smoke, the crew finally spot the airport.
Okay, we have the airport.
The tower has you in sight. You're cleared to land.
It is less than half an hour since the crew first heard the circuit breakers pop. A minor annoyance has turned into a full-scale disaster. And an already unbearable situation is just about to get much worse. From the outside, Air Canada Flight 797 seems like any other. But on the inside, 46 people are fighting for their lives. For the last several minutes, thick, toxic smoke has been filling the plane. Up front, Captain Donald Cameron can't afford to be distracted by what's going on in the cabin. He needs to concentrate on bringing down the plane as quickly as possible.
You need not acknowledge further transmission from the Air Canada 797. You are cleared to land. You are 4 miles from the airport. Good luck.
In a thick haze of smoke and soot, flight attendants Laura Kayama and Judy Davidson feel their way along the aisle, trying to reassure the passengers. But they can't get past the 12th row. The smoke and the heat are overwhelming.
I was praying the whole time. Dear God, please help us land this plane. Please get this plane safely on the ground.
I've been married for less than a year, and it's already over. So I started breathing as little as I could and start thinking seriously at my wife.
Fighting the reluctant controls, Captain Cameron's strength is being pushed to the limit. Squinting through the smoke, the crew of Flight 797 land hard. At 20 minutes after 7, the Air Canada plane is on the ground. It's less than 40 minutes since the first sign of any trouble on board the jet.
When we touch the ground, I assume that we're safe now. Now let's get out of this airplane.
But the smoke isn't letting up. Passengers are trying desperately to escape.
I got up out of my seat, and I remember putting my hands up on someone's back, and it was like waiting in a line. And I knew that was one line I didn't want to wait very long. So I turned around and went the other direction, not knowing I was actually heading towards the front of the plane.
Sergio Benetti is the first one to the door. He helps gasping passengers out. The cabin is pitch black and burning hot.